I'm Haley, 27, and until recently, I visited my parents every Sunday for dinner without fail. My relationship with my mom has always been complicated, but my dad and I were close. At least I thought we were. Then came that awful Sunday when my whole world collapsed. My mother screamed at me to get out and never come back. So I did exactly what she asked. I left and didn't return. Weeks later, my dad showed up at my door with a question that broke my heart all over again. Why'd you stop coming to dinner? If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to set boundaries with toxic family members. Let's talk about healing from family trauma together. Growing up in Rochester, Minnesota, I always felt trapped by my mother Pamela's expectations. Our house was immaculate, dinner was always precisely at 6:30, and God forbid if I brought home anything less than an A on my report card. My mother ran our home like a military operation with no room for error or individual expression. Stand up straight, Haley. No one wants to see that slouch. Your hair looks messy. Are you trying to embarrass me? You're wearing that? I guess some people don't care about first impressions. These were the soundtrack of my childhood, constant criticisms delivered in that particular tone my mother had perfected, sharp enough to cut, but quiet enough that no one outside our family would hear. She was all smiles and charm at church or school functions, the perfect suburban mom who volunteered for every committee and brought homemade cookies to bake sales. People always told me how lucky I was to have such a dedicated mother. My father Brian was kind but passive. He worked long hours as an accountant and seemed to find peace by avoiding conflict at all costs. When my mother's criticism would go too far, he might gently say, "Now, Pam, give the girl a break," but he would quickly back down if she turned her irritation toward him. I learned early that Dad wouldn't protect me from Mom's emotional outbursts. He was too busy protecting himself. Despite the tense home environment, I excelled in school. It was my escape. I joined every club that would keep me out of the house: debate team, yearbook committee, volleyball. I worked after-school jobs from the moment I was legally able. My goal was always clear: get into a good college far away from Rochester. When I received my acceptance letter to Northwestern University in Chicago, it felt like prison gates opening. My mother's reaction was predictable: Chicago is dangerous. You'll be mugged within a week. My father quietly slipped me extra money for dorm supplies and whispered, "I'm proud of you, kiddo," when Mom wasn't around. College was transformative. For the first time, I could breathe without feeling someone was measuring the depth of my inhalations. I made friends who didn't walk on eggshells. I dated without parental interrogations. I even dyed my hair purple one semester, something that would have caused a nuclear meltdown at home. After graduation, I landed a job at a marketing firm in downtown Chicago. Starting as a junior copywriter, I worked my way up through sheer determination. Just last month, I was promoted to senior marketing strategist, a fact my mother acknowledged with, "Well, I suppose that's fine if you don't want to aim for management." It was during my senior year of college that the Sunday dinner tradition began. My mother called one Wednesday, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Your father misses you," she said, though I suspected it was her who felt my absence. Against my better judgment, I agreed to come home that Sunday. Somehow, it became a weekly obligation. Every Sunday for the past 5 years, I would make the 2-hour drive from my Chicago apartment to their suburban home in Arlington Heights. The routine was always the same: arrive at 5, endure Mom's comments about my appearance or career or love life, enjoy Dad's awkward attempts at lightening the mood, help clean up, and escape by 8. It was exhausting, but oddly comforting in its predictability. 3 months ago, I met Jason. He's a graphic designer with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that immediately attracted me. After just a few dates, I found myself telling him things I rarely shared with anyone, including the complicated relationship with my family. Unlike previous boyfriends who dismissed my concerns with "all families have issues," Jason listened. He asked thoughtful questions. And eventually, he gently suggested that my Sunday ritual might not be healthy. "You spend all Saturday dreading it and all Monday recovering from it," he pointed out. "That's not normal, Haley." His words stayed with me, though I continued the Sunday visits. Change is hard, especially when it involves family patterns established over decades. On that particular Sunday, the one that changed everything, I noticed my mother seemed especially tense from the moment I arrived. Her lips were pressed in that thin line that always signaled stormy weather ahead. Dad was overly cheerful, another warning sign. Something was brewing, and I felt my stomach knot in anticipation. The dining room in my parents' Arlington Heights home looks like it belongs in a Pottery Barn catalog, perfect, pristine, and barely used except for our Sunday dinners. Mom's good china was set out, as always, with the crystal glasses that had been a wedding gift from her mother. The silverware gleamed under the chandelier light. Everything in its place, just how Mom liked it. The tension was palpable from the moment I arrived. Mom was in the kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables with the precision of a surgeon. Dad was hovering in the living room, his forced chair a transparent attempt to compensate for whatever mood had gripped my mother. "How's work, Pumpkin?" he asked too brightly while glancing toward the kitchen. "It's good," I replied cautiously. "I've been put in charge of the new pharmaceutical account. It's a big responsibility." "That's wonderful," he exclaimed, but his eyes darted kitchenward again. Dinner began with Mom's pot roast, the same meal she'd been making every third Sunday for as long as I could remember. The conversation was stilted, filled with uncomfortable silences and Dad's increasingly desperate attempts at small talk. "Weather's supposed to be nice next weekend," he offered, pushing potatoes around his plate. I saw an opening and took it. "Actually, about next weekend. I might not be able to make it for dinner. We have a major presentation on Monday, and I'll probably need to prep on Sunday." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth, and her eyes locked onto mine with laser intensity. "You're not coming to dinner?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. "Just next week," I clarified quickly. "It's a really important client, and more important than family?" She placed her fork down with deliberate care. Dad jumped in. "Now, Pam, Haley's job is demanding. We should be proud. Stay out of this, Brian." Mom's tone silenced him instantly. She turned back to me. "I cook all day for these dinners. I clean the house. I make everything perfect. And you can't be bothered to show up." "Mom, it's not that I can't be bothered. It's work. It's one Sunday. It starts with one Sunday. Then it's two. Then you're too busy for us all together." Her voice was rising now. "Just like college when you couldn't come home for weekends. Just like when you moved to that apartment downtown instead of the suburbs where we could see you more often." I felt the familiar frustration building. "Mom, I'm 27 years old. I have a career. I have a life in Chicago." "A life that doesn't include your family," she snapped. "We've seen how that works. You with your fancy job and your new boyfriend. Too good for us now." "That's not fair," I protested, feeling heat rise to my face. "I drive 2 hours every single Sunday to be here. And we're supposed to be grateful? For the bare minimum." She laughed bitterly. "Your cousin Melissa calls her mother every day. Every single day." "I'm not Melissa." The words came out sharper than I intended. "That's obvious," Mom retorted. "Melissa just made partner at her law firm. She owns her condo. She's engaged to a doctor." And there it was, the real issue. Not my absence next Sunday, but my perceived inadequacy in the grand competition that existed only in my mother's mind. "My job is important to me," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm good at it. I just got promoted." "Why can't that be enough?" "Because you could do better if you applied yourself. You settle, Haley. You always have." She gesticulated wildly with her knife. "That apartment in that neighborhood. That job with no real future. That boyfriend with the earring." Dad attempted intervention again. "Pamela, please. Haley works very hard. And now she's too busy for family dinner. The one thing I ask for." Mom's voice had reached that brittle pitch that signaled imminent explosion. "I didn't say I was too busy," I clarified, feeling the conversation spiraling out of control. "I said I might need to miss next week. For work." "Work," she scoffed. "As if typing on a computer all day is such demanding labor. Try raising a child who doesn't appreciate anything you've done for her. Try that for demanding." I took a deep breath, trying Jason's suggested technique for difficult conversations. I understand you're upset, Mom. I appreciate everything you do for these dinners. I'm just asking for flexibility for one weekend. Her eyes narrowed. Don't use that condescending therapy talk on me. I know what you're doing. I'm trying to have a reasonable conversation. You're trying to manipulate the situation, like you always do. Poor Haley with her difficult mother. She pushed back from the table abruptly. I've sacrificed everything for you, and this is the thanks I get. Mom, that's not fair. Life isn't fair. You think I wanted to be stuck in this house while your father traveled for work? You think I didn't have dreams? I gave them up for this family. The conversation had veered into familiar, dangerous territory. My mother's resentment about her life choices was a weapon she wielded frequently. Nobody forced you to give up your career, I said quietly, immediately regretting the words. Mom's face flushed crimson. How dare you? How dare you? I chose family. Something you clearly know nothing about with your selfish choices. She stood up so quickly her chair screeched against the hardwood floor. Dad reached for her arm, but she shook him off. You've always been difficult, Haley. Always. From the day you were born, fighting everything. Your clothes are always wrong. Your hair is always a mess. You date these losers. You take this dead-end job. And now you're too important for family dinner. Mom, please. No. I'm done making excuses for you. I'm done pretending to my friends that everything's fine when my daughter clearly wants nothing to do with her family. That's not true. You think I don't see how you look at this house? Like you're too good for it? Like we're beneath you with your big city life. I've never said or thought that. You don't have to say it. It's written all over your face every time you walk through that door. She was shouting now, spittle flying from her lips. The contempt. The judgment. Dad stood up. Pamela, please calm down. The neighbors will hear. I don't care who hears. She grabbed her plate and slammed it down so hard it cracked in two. 27 years I've put up with this ingratitude. 27 years of trying to raise a daughter who looks down on everything I am. I felt tears burning behind my eyes but refused to let them fall. Mom, I don't look down on you. I just need to live my own life. Her laugh was ugly, primal. Your own life. Of course. Far away from us. Well, you know what? You've made your choice very clear. All I said was I might miss one dinner. Get out, she screamed, her face contorted with rage. Get out and never come back. You've been nothing but a disappointment. The silence that followed was absolute. I stared at my mother, this woman who had given birth to me, raised me, and just banished me from her home. I looked at my father, waiting for him to say something, anything. His face was ashen, his eyes on the broken plate. He said nothing. In that moment, something broke inside me too. A lifetime of trying to please an unpleasable woman, of walking on eggshells, of accepting criticism as love, it all crystallized into a single moment of clarity. I stood up slowly, my legs surprisingly steady. Okay, I said simply. Haley, Dad finally spoke, his voice weak. Your mother doesn't mean. Yes, I do, Mom interjected. I absolutely mean it. I looked at my father, silently begging him to stand up for me just this once. He looked away. Without another word, I walked to the entryway, grabbed my purse and jacket, and left. The sound of the front door closing behind me was oddly anticlimactic for such a life-altering moment. In my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I made a decision. For once in my life, I would take my mother at her word. I would not come back. The drive back to Chicago was a blur. Muscle memory guided me along the familiar highway while my mind replayed the scene in my parents' dining room on endless loop. My mother's contorted face. The broken plate. My father's silence. The slamming door. I was halfway home before the tears finally came, blurring the headlights of oncoming traffic into golden streaks. I pulled over at a rest stop, killed the engine, and let myself break down completely. I cried for the little girl who could never be good enough, for the teenager who plotted escape routes, for the adult still seeking approval from people incapable of giving it freely. When the storm passed, I called Jason. Can I come over? My voice sounded strange, hollowed out. Of course. Are you okay? Did something happen at dinner? I'll tell you when I get there. Jason's apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in Wicker Park, all exposed brick and large windows. He opened the door before I could knock, concern etched on his face. One look at my red-rimmed eyes, and he pulled me into a tight embrace. Over mugs of tea at his kitchen counter, I recounted the evening's events. Jason listened without interrupting, his expression darkening when I described my mother's final words and my father's failure to intervene. "So that's it," I concluded flatly. "I'm taking her at her word. I'm not going back." Jason covered my hand with his. "I think that's the right decision, Haley." What she said, that was emotional abuse. Plain and simple. The term landed like a physical blow. Abuse. I'd never applied that word to my upbringing. Difficult, yes. Complicated, certainly. But abuse? My mom's just high-strung, I said automatically, the familiar defense mechanism kicking in. She doesn't mean half of what she says. Doesn't she? Jason's voice was gentle but firm. Because it sounds like she meant every word tonight. I stared into my cooling tea, watching ripples form as my hand trembled slightly. Maybe she did. That night, I slept fitfully on Jason's couch, declining his offer to take the bed. I needed the small discomfort, the unfamiliarity. It matched my internal landscape. Monday morning arrived with no calls or texts from either parent. I went to work, moved through meetings on autopilot, and returned to my apartment feeling strangely weightless. The Sunday dinner that had structured my calendar for 5 years was suddenly gone. The obligation lifted. I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the Chicago skyline glitter against the night sky, and felt something unexpected, relief. Tuesday and Wednesday passed without contact. By Thursday, I'd expected at least my father to reach out. His silence was more hurtful than my mother's outburst in some ways. It confirmed what I'd always suspected but never wanted to admit. His love was conditional, dependent on my maintaining peace with my mother at all costs. The first Sunday after the blow-up arrived. At 3:30, the time I would normally be getting ready for the drive to Arlington Heights, I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. My body was conditioned to prepare for battle. Instead, I called a friend and went to brunch. We lingered over mimosas and omelets, something I'd never been able to do on Sundays before. The simple pleasure of unhurried conversation without watching the clock felt revolutionary. That evening, when I would normally be driving back to Chicago nursing fresh emotional wounds, I took a long bath, read a novel, and went to bed early. Monday morning, I woke without the emotional hangover that typically followed Sunday dinners. As the second Sunday approached, I found myself making an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Amara was a woman in her 50s with a calm demeanor and direct gaze. "Tell me why you're here, Haley," she said after preliminary introductions. "I think I might have been emotionally abused by my mother," I said, the words still feeling foreign on my tongue. "And I need to understand why I've allowed it to continue into adulthood." Over the next hour, I provided a condensed version of my childhood and the recent explosive dinner. Dr. Amara listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "What you're describing sounds like a pattern of narcissistic behavior from your mother and enabling behavior from your father," she said finally. "The good news is that recognizing these patterns is the first step toward breaking them." I left that first session with homework, to journal about my feelings each day and to read a book about adult children of emotionally immature parents. The simple act of naming what I'd experienced was both validating and terrifying. The second Sunday without dinner came and went. Still no word from either parent. I took myself to a movie, buying popcorn and candy without hearing my mother's voice in my head counting calories. On Monday evening, my phone chimed with a text. My heart leapt to my throat when I saw it was from my father. "Are you okay? We missed you yesterday." The message was so inadequate, so divorced from reality, that I laughed out loud in my empty apartment. Miss me? After telling me to get out and never come back? After 2 weeks of silence? I didn't respond immediately. I took the question to my second therapy session with Dr. Amara. "What do you want to say to your father?" she asked. "That I'm furious with him," I admitted. That his silence hurt as much as Mom's screaming. That I needed him to stand up for me just once, and he failed. "Those are all valid feelings, Haley. The question is whether expressing them will help you heal or just perpetuate the cycle. I considered her words carefully. I think I need to be honest, but not reactive. I don't want to be pulled back into their dynamic. That evening, I composed a brief reply, "I'm fine," taking some space after what happened. His response came seconds later. "Your mother was just upset. You know how she gets." The familiar excuse, the minimization of harm, the implicit request for me to be the bigger person yet again. I turned off my phone without replying. The third Sunday arrived. I went hiking with Jason in a forest preserve outside the city. The autumn leaves were beginning to turn, painting the landscape in golds and crimsons. We walked for hours, talking about everything and nothing. When he took my hand, it felt natural, right? For the first time in weeks, I didn't think about my parents at all. The fourth Sunday, I took a spontaneous weekend trip to Michigan with 2 college friends. We stayed in a small lakeside cabin, drank wine around a bonfire, and laughed until our sides hurt. I didn't check my phone until Sunday night, finding 3 missed calls from my father and a text asking why I wasn't answering. I replied simply, "Was out of town with friends. Still need space." His response, "This has gone on long enough, Haley. Your mother is upset." I didn't bother pointing out the absurdity of that statement. Of course she was upset. She was always upset. The difference was that I no longer felt responsible for managing her emotions. During my 4th therapy session, Dr. Amara helped me see how much of my life had been structured around avoiding my mother's displeasure and seeking my father's tepid approval. "What would your life look like if you made choices based solely on what you want?" she asked. The question stunned me. What did I want? I'd spent so long anticipating others' needs and reactions that I wasn't sure I knew anymore. "I'd start by cutting my hair," I said, surprising myself with the answer. Mom always said long hair was more feminine, more proper. I've wanted a bob for years. The next day, I went to a salon and cut 10 inches off my hair, donating it to a charity that made wigs for cancer patients. The stylist shaped it into a sleek bob that framed my face perfectly. Looking at my reflection, I felt lighter in every sense of the word. The 5th Sunday came with another change. I deleted the recurring calendar reminder for family dinner. It was a small act, but it felt momentous. I was officially breaking the cycle. That evening, as I was cooking dinner with Jason in my apartment, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, my father stood in the hallway, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Dad looked out of place in the hallway of my apartment building, his suburban business casual at odds with the urban setting. He clutched his car keys nervously, knuckles white with tension. "Haley," he said, his voice a mix of relief and apprehension. "Can I come in?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to close the door, to protect the peace I'd been building in his absence. Another part recognized the courage it must have taken for him to drive into the city, navigate street parking, and show up unannounced. "I have company," I said, neither welcoming nor dismissing him. "Oh." His face fell. "I can come back another time." "It's fine," I relented, stepping aside. "Come in." Jason appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in hand. I made brief introductions, watching my father assess the man in my life with obvious curiosity. "I was just heading out anyway," Jason said tactfully. "Early meeting tomorrow." He kissed my cheek and whispered, "Call me later if you need to," before grabbing his jacket and nodding politely to my father on his way out. The apartment felt smaller with just the 2 of us. Dad stood awkwardly in my living room, taking in the art prints and bookshelves that defined my personal space. "Nice place," he offered. "Cozy." "Thanks." I gestured to the couch. "Wanna sit?" He perched on the edge of the cushion like he might need to make a quick escape. I took the armchair opposite, creating a deliberate distance between us. "So, I began when the silence stretched uncomfortable. What brings you to Chicago on a Sunday night?" He looked genuinely confused. "I wanted to check on you. You haven't been answering my calls, and you missed dinner again today." The disconnect was so profound I almost laughed. "Dad, do you remember what happened the last time I was at your house?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Your mother was upset. She said some things in the heat of the moment. She told me to get out and never come back," I said flatly. "Those were her exact words." "You know she didn't mean it that way," he said, the familiar excuse rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. She has a temper. She says things she doesn't mean when she's angry. And how am I supposed to know which of her words are real and which aren't? I asked, feeling the anger I'd been processing in therapy rising to the surface. Should I just ignore the hurtful things and keep coming back for more? Dad looked down at his hands. It's just how she is, Haley. You know that. That's not good enough anymore, I said quietly. It's never been good enough, but I accepted it because I didn't think I had a choice. Now I realize I do. My father's expression was pained. So you're just never coming back? Cutting us off completely. I'm taking space to figure out what kind of relationship is healthy for me, I clarified. Right now, being yelled at and insulted during dinner every Sunday doesn't qualify. She misses you, he said, as if that solved everything. Has she said that? I challenged. Has she called to apologize or even acknowledge what happened? His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I continued. She expects me to come crawling back, pretending nothing happened, because that's the pattern. I get hurt, I swallow it, life goes on until the next explosion. She's your mother, Haley. Yes, and that should mean something. It should mean she treats me with basic respect. Dad rubbed his forehead, looking exhausted. What do you want from us? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? In therapy, I'd been focusing on establishing boundaries, not on defining the relationship I hoped to have. I want acknowledgement that what happened wasn't okay, I said slowly. I want an apology. A real one, not I'm sorry you feel that way, or I'm sorry but you provoked me. And I want things to change going forward. Your mother isn't good at apologies, Dad said, stating the obvious. I'm aware. But that's my boundary now. He looked at me with new eyes, as if seeing an unfamiliar person in his daughter's place. Perhaps he was. The Haley who drove obediently to Sunday dinner regardless of the emotional cost was gone. When did you cut your hair? He asked suddenly, noticing the change for the first time. Last week, I touched the ends self-consciously. Do you like it? It suits you, he said, surprising me with his directness. Your mother will hate it, of course. The unexpected honesty made me laugh. I know. A moment of genuine connection flickered between us, fragile but real. I don't know how to fix this, Haley, he admitted finally. I've never been good at standing up to your mother. It's easier to just go along. Easier for who? I asked gently. Not for me. And, honestly, not for you either. You look exhausted, Dad. He rubbed his eyes. I haven't been sleeping well since that dinner. Neither had I, at first, I acknowledged. But I'm working through it. I started seeing a therapist. I expected judgment or dismissal at the mention of therapy. Mental health wasn't a topic openly discussed in my family, but he just nodded. Probably smart, he said. I've thought about it myself over the years. The admission stunned me. You have. Your mother and I. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Our relationship hasn't always been healthy. I know that. I've known it for a long time. The understatement was so profound I didn't know how to respond. Why didn't you ever do anything about it? I asked finally. Fear, he said simply. Fear of conflict. Fear of being alone. Fear of change. Take your pick. The raw honesty was unlike anything I'd ever heard from my father. For the first time, I saw him not as the passive enabler of my mother's behavior, but as another of her victims. It's not too late, I offered. To make changes, I mean. He smiled sadly. Maybe, but it's complicated when you've been together 30 years. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken family history between us. I should get going, he said eventually, standing. Traffic will be bad heading back. I walked him to the door, unsure how to end this unprecedented conversation. Will you think about coming back for dinner? He asked, hand on the doorknob. Your mother won't admit it, but the house feels empty without you. I shook my head. Not yet. I need more than this, Dad. I need her to take responsibility for her actions. He nodded, resignation and understanding mingling in his expression. I'll talk to her. I can't promise anything, but I'll try. That's all I'm asking, I said. Just try. After he left, I called Jason and filled him in on the conversation. It was weird, I concluded. Like talking to a version of my dad I've never met before. More honest, more human. Sounds like you're not the only one doing some reflecting, Jason observed. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The conversation with my father hadn't resolved anything concrete, but it had shifted something inside me. The silent treatment I'd been receiving wasn't just my mother's retaliation, it was a space for truth to emerge. The next morning, I woke to a text from my father. It was good to see you yesterday. Your apartment is nice. Very you. The simple acknowledgement of my separate life, my personal taste, felt significant. I replied with a simple, thanks for coming by. Throughout the day, I found myself reflecting on the revelations from our conversation. My father's admission of fear resonated deeply. How much of my own life had been shaped by similar fears? Fear of disapproval. Fear of confrontation. Fear of being truly seen. In my next therapy session, I shared the details of my father's visit with Dr. Amara. It sounds like a meaningful interaction, she observed. How did it leave you feeling? Confused, I admitted. Part of me feels compassion for him, seeing how trapped he feels. Another part is angry that he recognizes the dysfunction, but has enabled it for decades. Both reactions are valid, she assured me. Relationships are rarely all good or all bad. The question is what boundaries you need going forward. The sixth Sunday arrived. My phone remained silent. No calls from either parent. I spent the day helping Jason move some furniture. Then we joined friends for dinner at a new restaurant in Logan Square. The evening was filled with laughter and easy conversation, no eggshells underfoot. Monday morning brought another text from my father. Your mother asked about you yesterday. Progress of a sort. I replied. What did you tell her? That you're doing well but need space. She didn't respond well. I could imagine. My mother viewed any assertion of independence as personal rejection. My distance wasn't about protecting myself in her mind, it was about hurting her. I'm sorry that's difficult for her, I wrote back. But my boundary stands. Days passed. I threw myself into work, excelling at the pharmaceutical account that had been the catalyst for the original argument. My boss mentioned the possibility of a year-end bonus if the campaign continued performing well. My personal life blossomed too. Jason and I were settling into the comfortable rhythms of a serious relationship, and my friendships felt more authentic now that I wasn't constantly rushing off for obligatory family time. The seventh Sunday, I woke to another text from Dad. I started seeing someone. A therapist, I mean. Had my first appointment yesterday. The message left me breathless. In our family, seeking help had always been viewed as weakness. For my father to take this step was nothing short of revolutionary. I'm proud of you, I wrote back. That takes courage. Your mother doesn't know, came his reply. Not ready for that conversation yet. I understood completely. One step at a time. That evening, my phone rang. Dad's number. I answered with trepidation. Haley, his voice sounded different, more assured somehow. I talked to your mother today. About what happened. My heart raced. How did that go? About how you'd expect, he said with a dry laugh. Denial. Anger. More denial. But I didn't back down this time. What changed? I asked, genuinely curious. There was a pause. My therapist asked me a question that hit home. He asked what I would think if a man spoke to his daughter the way your mother spoke to you. If I would consider that acceptable. The parallel landed like a punch to the gut. My father had always been protective of me in abstract ways, worrying about my safety in Chicago, insisting I call when I arrived home from long drives. Yet he had failed to protect me from the more immediate threat within our own home. And? I prompted when the silence stretched. And I realized I've been failing you, he said simply. For a very long time. Tears welled in my eyes. The acknowledgement I'd been seeking for years, delivered without qualification or excuse. Thank you for saying that, I managed. I told your mother she needs to apologize to you. A real apology. He sounded tired but determined. She's not there yet, but she admitted things haven't been right between you two. That's something. Yes, I agreed cautiously. It's something. She also said she'd be willing to try family therapy. Eventually. Not right away. The concession was so unexpected I almost dropped the phone. She actually said that? Well, she said maybe and changed the subject, Dad clarified. But from your mother, that's practically enthusiastic agreement. I laughed to spite myself. True. I was wondering, he said, voice tentative again, if you might be willing to meet me for lunch this week? Just us. Neutral territory. The request was reasonable, a step toward rebuilding without rushing back to the status quo. I'd like that, I said honestly. How about Wednesday? There's a cafe near my office. After we hung up, I sat in the stillness of my apartment, processing the conversation. For the first time since that explosive Sunday dinner, I felt a glimmer of hope that something might be salvaged from the wreckage of our family relationships. Not the same unhealthy dynamic that had existed before, but something new. Something with boundaries and respect. The revelation wasn't that my mother might change. I had my doubts about how much transformation was possible after decades of entrenched behavior. The revelation was that my father might finally be finding his voice. And in doing so, helping me strengthen mine. Café Lucerne sat on the ground floor of a renovated factory building in Chicago's West Loop, its industrial chic aesthetic a stark contrast to the suburban chain restaurants my father typically frequented. I arrived early, selecting a table by the windows where we could talk privately while still being in a public space. At precisely noon, Dad walked through the door. He'd shaved his usual salt and pepper stubble and wore a blue button-down I didn't recognize. The small effort to present himself differently for this different kind of meeting wasn't lost on me. You found it okay? I asked as he sat down across from me. GPS, he said with a small smile. Though parking was a nightmare. I don't know how you city folks manage. The familiar complaint about Chicago parking felt comfortingly normal, a mundane topic to ease us into more difficult territory. We ordered sandwiches and sparkling water, making awkward small talk about the weather and my work until the server departed with our order. So I began, folding my hands on the table. You wanted to meet? Dad nodded, suddenly looking nervous. I've been doing a lot of thinking since our conversation at your apartment. And my therapy sessions have, well, they've helped me see things differently. In what way? I asked, genuinely curious. He took a deep breath. I've spent 30 years being a coward, Haley. Avoiding conflict with your mother at all costs. I told myself I was keeping the peace, being a good husband. But the truth is, I was just afraid. The raw honesty caught me off guard. This man with his direct gaze and forthright admission barely resembled the father I'd known, the one who changed the subject when voices raised, who retreated to his garage workshop during arguments. Afraid of what, exactly? I asked gently. Of her anger. Of being alone. Of having to admit that our marriage isn't what I pretended it was. He looked down at his hands. But mostly, I was afraid of acknowledging how much I failed you. Dad. No, please let me finish. His voice was steady now, rehearsed. When your mother told you to get out and never come back, I should have intervened. I should have told her that was unacceptable. Instead, I sat there and said nothing, like I've done your entire life. Our sandwiches arrived, but neither of us moved to eat them. Why didn't you call me after? I asked, the question that had been burning inside me for weeks. After I left that night, Dad's expression was pained. I convinced myself it would blow over, like every other fight. That you'd come back next Sunday, and we'd all pretend nothing happened. When you didn't show up, I thought you just needed time to cool off. And after the second Sunday? The third? Your mother forbade me from calling you, he admitted. She said you were being childish and would come back when you were ready to apologize. Apologize? I repeated incredulously. For what? For disrespecting her home, was how she put it. He shook his head. I knew it was wrong, but I went along with it anyway. Until I couldn't anymore. What changed? I realized I might lose you for good, he said simply. And that terrified me more than anything your mother could do or say. The admission hung between us, profound in its simplicity. For the first time, my father had prioritized our relationship over keeping peace with my mother. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away, he continued. I know I've let you down repeatedly. But I want you to know I'm trying to change. I'm trying to be braver. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back. That means a lot to me, Dad. We began picking at our sandwiches, the heaviest part of the conversation behind us. "How is Mom, really?" I asked eventually. Dad considered the question carefully. "Struggling. She'd never admit it, but your absence has affected her deeply. She vacuums your old bedroom every day now." The image of my mother obsessively cleaning an empty room was both sad and telling. "Has she said anything about what happened?" "Not directly," he admitted. "But in our last argument about it, she said something interesting. She said she didn't understand why you are so sensitive now when you've heard worse from her before." I nearly choked on my water. "She actually admitted she's said worse things?" "I don't think she meant to," Dad replied. "But yes. And when I pointed it out, she got very quiet. That's when she mentioned maybe trying family therapy someday." Someday was vague, but still more openness than I'd expected from a woman who viewed therapy as something for weak people who can't handle life. "My therapist thinks your mother may have undiagnosed issues," Dad said hesitantly. "Possibly narcissistic traits or borderline personality tendencies. Apparently, these conditions often go unrecognized in women of her generation." The armchair diagnosis wasn't surprising, but hearing my father acknowledge it was revolutionary. For years, we'd all walked on eggshells, adapting to my mother's volatile emotions without ever naming the dysfunction. "My therapist has suggested something similar," I admitted. "Though she's careful not to diagnose someone she hasn't treated." "Would you consider coming back?" Dad asked, the question I'd been expecting. "Not to the regular Sunday dinners right away, but maybe for a visit? It might help move things forward." I considered the request carefully. I'm not ready to be in the same room as Mom until there's some acknowledgement of what happened. I can't just pretend those words were never said. Dad nodded, disappointment evident but accepting. "I understand. What if I could get her to write you a letter?" "Would you read it?" "I would," I agreed. "But I need it to be genuine, Dad. Not something you wrote that she signed, not filled with justifications or, but you also statements. A real apology." "I'll talk to her," he promised. "And regardless of what she does, I want you to know I'm sorry. For everything. For every time I didn't protect you, for every criticism I didn't challenge, for every boundary I didn't help you set." The apology loosened something that had been tightly wounded inside me for decades. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means more than you know." We finished our lunch on lighter topics, his vegetable garden, my new haircut, a movie we'd both recently seen. When it was time to leave, we walked together to the street. "This was good," Dad said, sounding relieved. "Different, but good." "Yes," I agreed. "It was." He hesitated, then opened his arms questioningly. I stepped into his embrace, the familiar smell of his aftershave bringing a rush of complicated emotions. The hug was brief but genuine. "I'll call you soon," he promised as we parted. "I'll answer," I replied, realizing I meant it. As I watched him walk to the parking garage, I felt a curious mixture of hope and caution. The conversation had been more honest than any we'd ever had, but words were just the beginning. Real change would require consistent action from both my parents, and from me too, in establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries. Back at my apartment that evening, I received a text from Dad. "Thank you for meeting today. It meant a lot. Your mother asked about you when I got home." "What did you tell her?" I replied, "The truth. That you're doing well, but still hurt by what happened. That she needs to apologize if she wants to repair things." "How did she respond?" I asked, holding my breath. "She cried," came his reply after a long pause. "Actually cried. Then went upstairs without a word. I think it might be sinking in that this time is different." The message gave me a complex mixture of emotions, satisfaction that my boundary was finally being taken seriously, sadness at the thought of my mother's tears, cautious hope that genuine change might be possible. "Keep me posted," I wrote back. "And Dad? I'm proud of you for speaking up." His response was simple, baby steps. That night, I called Jason and told him about lunch with my father. It was surreal, I concluded. Like meeting a version of my dad that's been hiding all these years. "People can surprise you when they're finally ready to face truth," Jason observed. "The question is whether your mom can do the same." "I'm not holding my breath," I admitted. "But I'm open to the possibility." "That's all you can be right now," he said. "Open but protected." The phrase stuck with me as I prepared for bed. Open but protected. It described precisely the balance I was trying to achieve, not shutting down completely, not building impenetrable walls, but creating boundaries that allowed authentic connection while preventing harm. For the first time since that explosive Sunday dinner, I felt something shift in the way I thought about my family. Not forgiveness, exactly. That would require accountability I hadn't yet seen from my mother. But perhaps understanding. And with understanding, the possibility of something new emerging from the ashes of what had been destroyed. 2 days after our lunch, my phone rang with my father's number. It was unusual for him to call during work hours, and my stomach tightened with apprehension. Dad? Is everything okay? Yes, fine, he assured me quickly. Do you have a minute to talk? I stepped away from my desk into an empty conference room. I'm at work, but I can talk briefly. What's up? I had a long conversation with your mother last night, he began, his voice holding an unfamiliar note of resolve. Actually, it was more than a conversation. It was, well, I guess you'd call it a confrontation. My grip tightened on the phone. What happened? After my therapy session yesterday, I came home determined to be honest with her. About everything. He took a deep breath. I told her that her behavior toward you has been emotionally abusive. That I've enabled it for years. That I won't do it anymore. The stark language, emotionally abusive, coming from my conflict-avoidant father was nothing short of revolutionary. How did she react? I asked, barely breathing. Not well, at first, he admitted. There was yelling, crying, accusations that I was betraying her by taking your side. She brought up every perceived slight from the past 30 years. It was intense. I'm sorry you had to deal with that alone, I said, meaning it. Don't be. It was long overdue. His voice was steady. Eventually, she ran out of steam, and something unexpected happened. She got very quiet and asked me if I really thought she was abusive. And you said? I said yes. That constantly criticizing, belittling, and controlling someone you claim to love is abuse, whether you intend it that way or not. He paused. I told her I believe she loves you, but that her way of showing it has caused serious harm. I sank into a chair, overcome by hearing my father articulate what I'd struggled to name for years. Haley? Are you still there? Yes, I managed. I'm just processing. What did Mom say to that? She said she needed to think. Went to bed early. This morning, she was subdued, asked if my therapist could recommend someone for her to talk to. I nearly dropped my phone. Mom is willing to see a therapist? Apparently, he sounded as surprised as I felt. She said, and I'm quoting here, if I've been hurting my daughter without realizing it, I need to understand why. The admission was so unexpected, so contrary to everything I knew about my mother, that I couldn't formulate a response. I know, Dad said, correctly interpreting my silence. I was shocked too. Do you think she means it? I asked, afraid to hope. Or is this just another manipulation? I think she's genuinely shaken, he replied carefully. Whether that translates to real change, well, that remains to be seen. But it's a start, Haley. A crack in the wall. Yes, I agreed, cautious but moved. It's something. There's more, he continued. She asked if I thought you would be open to family therapy. Not right away, but once she started individual sessions. The prospect was both tempting and terrifying. Family therapy would provide a structured, mediated environment to address decades of dysfunction. It would also require me to be vulnerable with a woman who had consistently weaponized my vulnerabilities. I'm not sure, I said honestly. Maybe eventually. I'd need to see evidence that she's really doing the work first. That's completely fair, Dad assured me. I told her not to expect immediate forgiveness. That trust has to be rebuilt over time. Thank you for that, I said, feeling a wave of gratitude for this new, advocate version of my father. One more thing before I let you get back to work, he added. She's writing you a letter. I didn't suggest it, it was her idea. She's been working on it all morning. My heart raced. Did you read it? No. She wouldn't let me. Said it needed to be between the two of you. After we hung up, I sat in the conference room for several minutes, trying to process the seismic shift in my family dynamics. For as long as I could remember, The pattern had been set in stone. Mom erupts, dad placates, I accommodate. The thought that both of them might be willing to examine their roles in this toxic cycle was nothing short of miraculous. That evening, I met Jason for dinner and shared the developments. Wow, he said, impressed. Your dad really stepped up. I know. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, I admitted. For him to call and say Mom changed her mind, or that he didn't really mean what he said. That's understandable given your history, Jason observed, reaching for my hand across the table. But maybe this time really is different. Maybe, I agreed, allowing myself a tentative hope. I've never heard my father so direct, so present. And your mom? Do you think she's capable of meaningful change? I considered the question carefully. I don't know. Narcissistic traits are notoriously resistant to treatment. But the fact that she's willing to try therapy at all is unprecedented. What are you hoping for, best case scenario? Jason asked. The question caught me off guard. In the weeks since the explosive dinner, I'd been focused on establishing boundaries and processing my feelings. I hadn't allowed myself to envision a positive outcome. I don't expect a perfect mother-daughter relationship, I said slowly. But maybe one where we can interact without constant criticism. Where I don't leave every conversation feeling diminished. Where there's basic respect. That sounds reasonable, Jason nodded. Modest, even. Years of disappointment lower your expectations, I said with a wry smile. The next morning, a thick envelope arrived at my office with my mother's distinctive handwriting on the address. I stared at it for several minutes before tucking it into my bag. This wasn't something to read between meetings. That evening, alone in my apartment, I finally opened the envelope. 3 pages of my mother's neat penmanship, not a word crossed out or amended. She had clearly copied it from a draft. Dear Haley, it began formally. I am writing because I don't trust myself to say these things without becoming defensive if we were face to face. I settled onto my couch and began to read. The letter was unlike anything I'd ever received from my mother. There were no accusations, no, but you also statements, none of the deflection I'd grown to expect. Instead, she wrote about her own upbringing with a critical, perfectionistic mother and an absent father. She described how she had promised herself she would be different with her own children, then gradually realized she had recreated the same dynamic. When your father told me my behavior toward you has been emotionally abusive, my first instinct was rage, she wrote. But when I calmed down, I realized he was right. I have been trying to control you your entire life. I have criticized you for not being who I think you should be, instead of appreciating who you actually are. Tears welled in my eyes as I continued reading. She acknowledged specific incidents, berating me before school dances, criticizing my career choices, making cutting remarks about my appearance, and took responsibility for the harm caused. I don't expect this letter to magically fix what I've broken, she concluded. I am seeking professional help to understand why I've treated the person I love most in this world so poorly. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if that's not possible. If you're willing, I would like to work toward a healthier relationship, on whatever terms you feel comfortable with. It was signed simply Mom, with a postscript. Your father did not help me write this or read it before I sent it. These are my words and my responsibility. I read the letter 3 times, emotions cycling through me, suspicion, hope, grief, cautious optimism. Was this genuine remorse or another manipulation? The words seemed sincere, but I'd been fooled before by temporary contrition that evaporated once my mother got what she wanted. I called Dr. Amara and scheduled an emergency session for the following day. She listened as I read portions of the letter aloud, then asked thoughtful questions about my reactions. What do you want to do with this, Haley? She asked finally. There's no rush to respond. Part of me wants to maintain distance until I see if these realizations translate to actual behavioral changes, I admitted. Another part feels like I should acknowledge the effort she's making. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Dr. Amara pointed out. You can recognize her effort while still maintaining your boundaries. I nodded, seeing the wisdom in her words. I think I'll write back. Let her know I received the letter and appreciate her honesty. But make it clear that rebuilding trust will take time. That night, I composed my response, brief but not cold, acknowledging her effort while not making promises I wasn't ready to keep. I mentioned that I might be open to family therapy eventually, but needed to see consistent change first. The following Sunday, what would have been the 8th missed family dinner, my phone rang at 6:30 p.m., precisely when we would normally be eating dessert. Dad's number. Hello. I answered cautiously. Hi, Haley. My father's voice was warm. I'm not calling to pressure you about visiting. Just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I'm okay, I said, relaxing slightly. I got Mom's letter. And I sent one back yesterday. She received it this morning, he confirmed. It meant a lot to her. We chatted for a few minutes about mundane things, work, weather, a movie he'd recently seen. The conversation was light but genuine, unmarked by the tension that had characterized our interactions for years. Oh, before I forget, he said as we were about to hang up. Your mother had her first therapy appointment yesterday. Really? I couldn't hide my surprise. How did it go? She came home exhausted and quiet, he reported. Said it was intense but necessary. Scheduled another appointment for next week. That's encouraging, I said carefully. Small steps, Dad agreed. But in the right direction. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the Chicago skyline, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. The situation was evolving in ways I couldn't have imagined when I drove away from my parents' house that explosive Sunday. Not resolved, not healed, but changing. Jason called later that evening. Want to come over and watch that documentary we talked about? Actually, would you mind coming here instead? I asked. I've had an emotional day and could use the company. He arrived an hour later with takeout and a gentle understanding that allowed me to share as much or as little as I wanted. As we sat side by side on my couch, his steady presence beside me, I realized how much healthier this relationship felt compared to any I'd experienced before. What are you thinking about? He asked, noticing my contemplative mood. Just patterns, I said. How we repeat them until we consciously break them. He nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. You're breaking a big one. That takes courage. It's not just me, I acknowledged. My parents are showing courage too in their own ways. The realization was humbling. As much as I'd focused on my own journey these past weeks, my parents were on journeys of their own. My father finding his voice after decades of silence. My mother confronting behaviors so ingrained she might not have recognized them as harmful. Family healing, I was learning, wasn't a destination, but a process. Messy, non-linear, with no guaranteed outcome. The only certainty was that none of us would emerge unchanged. 3 weeks after receiving my mother's letter, I agreed to meet my father for lunch at a neutral location, a small Italian restaurant halfway between Chicago and Arlington Heights. We had been talking regularly by phone, each conversation a little easier than the last, but this would be our first face-to-face meeting since our previous lunch. Dad arrived early, already seated at a corner table when I walked in. He stood to greet me, the hug less awkward than before. You look good, he said as we settled in. Peaceful. I feel more peaceful, I admitted. Therapy helps. And so does distance. We ordered, making comfortable small talk until our food arrived. Then Dad's expression grew more serious. I've been thinking a lot about family patterns, he began. How my own father was distant, uninvolved. I used to promise myself I'd be different with my kids, more present, more engaged. But I realized recently that while I was physically present, I was emotionally absent in all the ways that mattered. Dad, you don't have to. I do, Haley. Please. His eyes held a determination I was still getting used to. My father avoided conflict by simply not being home. I avoided it by being physically present, but checking out mentally whenever things got tense. Different methods, same result. I wasn't there for you when you needed protection. The acknowledgement was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Thank you for saying that. My therapist has helped me see how much of my identity was wrapped up in being the good guy, the peacekeeper, the reasonable one compared to your mother's volatility. But keeping peace at the expense of protecting my child wasn't actually good at all. I nodded, understanding. You were doing the best you could with the tools you had. Maybe, he conceded. But I'm getting better tools now. We both are. How is Mom doing with therapy? I asked, the question I'd been hesitant to raise. Dad considered his answer carefully. It's challenging for her. Her therapist apparently doesn't pull punches. There have been some difficult evenings after sessions. He paused. But she's sticking with it, which says something. And I've noticed small changes. She's more reflective before reacting. Catches herself sometimes mid-criticism. That's significant, I acknowledged, trying to imagine my mother exercising such self-awareness. She asked me to tell you she's working hard, Dad continued. And that she understands if you're not ready to see her yet. The uncharacteristic respect for my boundaries caught me off guard. I appreciate that. I'm not ready for one-on-one interaction, but I hesitated, then committed. I might be open to a family therapy session. With the right therapist. Dad's face brightened. Really? That would mean a lot to her. To both of us. I'm not making any promises about outcomes, I cautioned. But I'm willing to try one session and see how it goes. That's all anyone can ask, he assured me. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in the waiting room of a family therapist's office in a North Chicago suburb. Dr. Levine had come highly recommended for her experience with family systems and narcissistic dynamics. My stomach churned with anxiety as I waited for my parents to arrive. They entered together, my father offering a tentative smile, my mother looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen her. She had lost weight, her usually immaculate appearance slightly subdued. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away. Thank you for coming, Dad said as they sat across from me. Before I could respond, the therapist called us in. Dr. Levine was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. She outlined the ground rules for our session. No interrupting, no personal attacks, using I statements rather than accusations. Haley, she began, would you share why you're here today? I took a deep breath. I'm here because I love my parents and want a relationship with them, but not the unhealthy dynamic we've had for years. I need to understand if change is possible. My mother flinched slightly at unhealthy dynamic, but remained silent. Dr. Levine nodded. Pamela, what about you? My mother's hands twisted nervously in her lap. I'm here because I've hurt my daughter. I want to understand how and why, so I can stop doing it. The simple admission, devoid of justifications or deflections, stunned me. And Brian? I'm here to support both my wife and daughter, my father said. And to take responsibility for my role in enabling harmful patterns. Dr. Levine guided us through a structured conversation, intervening when tensions rose or communication broke down. My mother struggled visibly with not becoming defensive, but each time she caught herself, sometimes after a gentle reminder from Dr. Levine, sometimes on her own. The breakthrough moment came unexpectedly as we discussed the Sunday dinner that had precipitated our estrangement. When you told me to get out and never come back, I said to my mother, it felt like you were throwing away our relationship over a minor scheduling conflict. It wasn't about the schedule, she admitted quietly. It was about control. When you said you might miss dinner, it triggered my deepest fear, that you were slipping away from me, that I was losing my place in your life. I lashed out to regain control. She paused, visibly struggling. My therapist has helped me see that my need to control comes from profound insecurity. It doesn't excuse what I said, but it helps explain it. The self-awareness was so unlike the mother I'd known that I found myself momentarily speechless. I'm not asking you to forget what I said, she continued when I didn't respond. Or to pretend it didn't hurt you. I just want you to know I didn't mean it. I never want you out of my life, Haley. The past weeks have been. Her voice broke, unbearable. For me too, I admitted, surprising myself with the confession. Despite the relief of establishing boundaries, the separation had been painful. Dr. Levine guided us toward practical steps for moving forward. We agreed to continue family therapy twice monthly, while my parents would continue their individual work. Sunday dinners would be replaced temporarily with more neutral interactions, perhaps lunch in public places, where the likelihood of explosive arguments would be reduced. And Haley, Dr. Levine added, it's important that you maintain your own boundaries. Reconciliation doesn't mean returning to old patterns. What would help you feel safe in rebuilding this relationship? I considered the question carefully. I need acknowledgement when old patterns emerge. No gaslighting or denying what was said or done. And I need respect for my separate life and choices, even when they're not what my parents would choose for me. My mother nodded, though I could see the effort it took. I can try to do that. That's all any of us can do, Dr. Levine affirmed. Try, notice when we fail, and try again differently. In the parking lot after the session, we stood awkwardly beside our cars, the familiar goodbye hug no longer automatic. Thank you for coming today, my father said. I know it wasn't easy. I nodded. It wasn't. But it was worth doing. My mother looked at me directly for the first time. Your hair suits you, she said simply. The shorter style. It frames your face nicely. The compliment, delivered without qualification or backhanded criticism, felt like a small miracle. Thank you, I managed. Would you consider? She hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. Maybe coffee next week? Just a short visit. I appreciated that she was asking rather than assuming or demanding. Coffee would be okay, I agreed. There's a place near my office that's good. Her face brightened momentarily before she controlled her reaction, perhaps worried that too much enthusiasm might pressure me. Just let me know when works for you. As I drove back to my apartment, I reflected on the session. Nothing had been magically resolved. Decades of dysfunctional patterns couldn't be undone in an hour. But there had been moments of genuine connection, glimmers of the mother I had always wanted, one who could see me as a separate person worthy of respect. Over the following months, we established a new, tentative relationship. Coffee once a week became our routine, sometimes with Dad joining, sometimes just the two of us. My mother still occasionally slipped into old patterns. A critical comment about my apartment, an unsolicited opinion about my career choices, but the difference was in what happened afterward. I'm sorry, she would say, catching herself. That was inappropriate. Your choices are yours to make. The apologies, awkward at first, became more natural with repetition. They didn't erase the hurt of the initial comments, but they created space for healing rather than escalation. Family therapy continued, providing a structured environment to address deeper issues. In one particularly powerful session, my mother spoke about her own mother's relentless criticism and impossible standards. I promised myself I'd be different with my children, she said through tears. But I didn't know how. I had no model for healthy mothering. The revelation didn't excuse her behavior, but offered context that helped me see her struggles with more compassion. She wasn't a monster, but a wounded person who had wounded others in turn. 6 months after the explosive Sunday dinner that had changed everything, I agreed to return to my parents' home, not for the traditional dinner, but for a casual Saturday lunch. Jason accompanied me, providing both moral support and a buffer against old dynamics. The visit was awkward but peaceful. My mother had clearly gone to great lengths to prepare food she knew I liked, without making a show of the effort. My father was attentive without hovering. When Jason mentioned our plans to take a weekend trip to Michigan the following month, neither parent questioned or criticized the decision. As we prepared to leave, my mother handed me a small wrapped package. It's nothing big, she said quickly. Just something I thought you might like. At home, I unwrapped it to find a framed photograph of teenage me at a debate tournament, proudly holding a first-place trophy. I remembered the day clearly, and also remembered my mother's response at the time. Second team would have been more competitive. A note accompanied the photo. I was wrong that day. I was wrong many days. I was proud of you then, and I'm proud of you now. Love, Mom. The simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. Not because it erased years of criticism, but because it showed genuine effort to see me differently, to see me truly. Our relationship continues to evolve, with setbacks and progress in equal measure. My mother still struggles with controlling tendencies, my father still occasionally reverts to peacekeeper mode, and I still find myself bracing for criticism that doesn't come. Old habits die hard. But we're trying. All three of us, in our different ways, are working to create something healthier than what came before. I don't know if we'll ever have the easy, loving relationship portrayed in heartwarming movies. Our history is too complex, the wounds too deep. What we do have, though, is something real. A relationship based on growing awareness rather than denial. Boundaries that are increasingly respected. Communication that, while sometimes painful, is more honest than ever before. I still maintain my Sunday evening ritual, but now it's for self-care rather than recovery. A quiet night with a book, a long bath, or time with Jason. Sometimes my father calls, just to check in. Sometimes my mother sends a text, not demanding a response, just read it. Not because perfect reconciliation is guaranteed, it isn't, but because the effort itself is transformative. In establishing boundaries with my family, I've discovered my own strength. In watching my parents struggle to change lifelong patterns, I've learned about the possibility of growth at any age. If you're in a similar situation with your family, I hope you know you're not alone. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for your well-being and for any hope of healthy relationship. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and others is to say, this isn't acceptable anymore. Have you had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Did it lead to positive change or continued estrangement? Share your experience in the comments below. Every story matters, and someone reading might find comfort in knowing others have walked a similar path. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and thank you for allowing me to share my journey with you today. Remember that healing is possible, even when the path forward isn't clear.